Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone around the world. I'm Paul Sisler, and this is In the Moment. Today on the Vellum, TPA and I will discuss the hero's tale, the heroine's tale, the villain's tale. Sorry, we're an hour late. Sometimes life happens, and when life happens, we don't stand in the way of life. So life comes first, and then the show. A lot of things going on in the world. Banks are closing down. Countries are preparing for World War III. It's just, oh my God, we couldn't, us even as writers, couldn't write this shit and make it up. I'm telling you. I'm telling you. It's crazy. It's crazy. So, welcome to the Vellum. T-Paw, hello, hello.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Yeah. So, as you were saying about the World War III, it's funny is as you were saying that, my brain was like going, wait a minute. I could probably write a story about it, but then I'd get creeped out because then reality would just sort of like regurgitate whatever I created. And it's
Oh,
weird
I'm
because it's
telling
like,
you. Some of this stuff that I'm seeing in the news is like you just can't make this shit up. It's just like, oh my God. And what's funny is I know people are going to be like, Paul, TikTok. Yeah. I get a lot of news from TikTok. All right. Now, please understand, you go through and somebody on TikTok says something and you're like, oh, wow, let me see if that's real. And then you go to research and it's like, oh my God, it's real. Oh my God. And you check other sources and it's like, yep, it's real. The ICC put warrants out for Putin's arrest. It's real. It's real. So yeah, banks closing. Again, I think the first time I heard about a bank going down was on YouTube, and the second time was signature was on TikTok, and it's just like, wow. So it is amazing at how much information is out there on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, on all these different platforms before it hits mainstream media news, and it blows me away. And no, you can't trust you can't trust any of these people to be putting out accurate stuff. You do have to check your sources. So you check their sources and make sure the stuff is real. But it's amazing when you find out that the stuff is real. And tomorrow on Comedy and Controversy, we will be talking a lot more about the Bank and World War III situation. So check us out tomorrow with Jeremy Baker on Comedy and Controversy. But today, let's talk about the heroes, the heroines, and the villains.
the funny is the Putin thing could be known as the villain's tale. And also the fact that I want to comment on the TikTok thing for a moment. I had watered, like, I had completely, like, my mind was shutting out TikTok for the longest time and was like, just like depowering it, just like dismissing the very significance, the pathos of TikTok and like its very significance in culture and media and everything. But the thing about it is that for those media outlets you're talking about, where it comes to TikTok and it comes to other social media sites first before it hits them. The funny thing about that is that I was watching a podcast with Joe Rogan, and then with he had Russell Brand on as guest, and they had actually touched on that. They touched on the fact that a lot of news media outlets will literally report whatever they're being told to report, and they'll get paid to report it by their sponsors and like pharmaceutical companies that sponsor them and other people. So you really have to watch what you're consuming when it comes to those news reporters, because a lot of them are being paid to say those things by a sponsor or by somebody else. Whereas if it's on TikTok and it's TikTok first, or it's Twitter or some other else, yeah, you gotta do a bit of background checking on your information to make sure it's not misinformation. But in a lot of ways, TikTok is also being curated not by the app itself, but by people who operate on the app, people who use it, you and me, other people, like
Yeah,
everybody. TikTok is literally curated by its users. And so if you're going to dismiss TikTok's importance, then you're going to dismiss people's tastes, people's interests, the
Right.
things that drive them to use the app in the first place. And so that's why, like, whenever I see things on TikTok, and especially if it's like news related or if it seems relevant to our governments or our world, I dial in a little bit. I don't just dismiss it, because I'm like, going, wait a minute, like, what are people saying? Like, is this a rumor? Is this something that was cooked up and someone decided to create a theory or something? Or is it actual factual? And a lot of times, if it hits TikTok, usually it's hit Twitter first, or usually it's hit those other places first, and then it'll cycle through TikTok. And so we can't downplay the significance of TikTok, since TikTok is literally the mouth of the people in a lot of ways. It's curated. Like, the algorithm, the trends are curated. Yeah, China owns a lot of the data, but that doesn't mean that China's the one controlling anything. They're not controlling shit. They're just collecting data and being like, ooh, let me take that nugget. Let me take that nugget, and like use it to commercialize or sell shit. Whereas the people that use the app, they're the ones who control the flow, because they're the ones who are using it. And TikTok is mastering the curation and then curating the information. I just had to comment on that real quick, because I'm like, we can't downplay it, because it's literally us, people, that are causing the flow. But as far as the hero's tale and villain's tale, I wanted to talk about the differences between the hero's tale, the villain's tale, and the heroine's tale. Tropes, which usually are something that a lot of people go, tropey, cliche. Tropes that come with it, and inverting expectation while having proper execution with finesse. What I mean by that is being able to take the most common trope or cliche, which means it's been done before, which means you've seen it before, and it becomes a commonality, which means it's just simply an idea that's been repeated. Taking that and then executing that within the story you're telling. When it comes to the hero's tale, we have the 12x or the 3x structure, which I tend to break down into 12. But you got the 3x structure. You have hero or person that wants to do courageous or heroic things in the face of danger, which courage is actually being terrified and doing it anyway, doing the job anyway. And then you got the villain's tale, which is a bit of the inversion of the hero's tale, but they're technically the same thing, because technically a villain is only a villain if they're an antagonist that opposes the hero. And you only see them as a villain if they do terrible things, or things that you would perceive as terrible, or things as bad. And it kind of becomes interesting when you introduce shades of gray, layering it with like the fact that people are imperfect, and the fact that it causes us as a society to measure ourselves based on fictional characters who are quote unquote perfect, who are purely good or purely evil. And so the reason why I wanted to talk about it is because I was thinking about it recently while I'm writing my own shit, and I was like, and it's not really shit, it's stories, but it's the fact that I have this hyperfixation with the hero's tale, but really I have the hyperfixation with the human experience. That's what it comes down to, or the creation's experience, because that's what it is. It's somebody who chooses in the face of danger to do something either stupid, noble, or brave in the face of said danger while being utterly terrified. And that's something that's part of horror too. Like when you write the horror genre, it's not just shaky cam and random music being played and the jump scare. It's the isolation of the senses. It's what is the character feeling? Oh, it's horror, so they're supposed to be terrified. So let's isolate that and then put it through a tunnel, because some of the best horror movies are done for relatively cheap. They're not, you don't blow $100 million to make a good horror movie. Not typically. Because usually in order to do that, you would have to actually terrify the audience and really get them to care about the character that you're trying to tell the story of, and then not be afraid to take risks with the story. Which is also why Scream is a popular movie franchise, which the newest one just came out, and apparently it's one of the goriest ones yet. What they did was they spent. I revisited the first Scream recently, and I was like, wait a minute, half this movie is them making fun of horror tropes or horror cliches that have been happening in media. And I'm like, wait a minute. So that means it's extremely self-aware. So you could do that where you're making a parody of your own genre, or you could do it where you're taking it utterly seriously. So one of the things I wanted to visit as far as tropes goes is stuff that I've either used because they're fun and hilarious sometimes. Is like will they, won't they? That's often used in romance, or often used in a hero. Whether will the hero do the goal or will they not? Are they reluctant? Are they, do they want to take on the destiny? Are they fucking terrified? Another thing that I've seen a lot that's in a lot of media, especially like Game of Thrones or other shows, is big R drama, which rape. And then you got good girl, bad girl. I'm glad that there's not much big R drama going on, because that means that the storyteller isn't taking advantage of a severely vulnerable situation, a very sensitive situation, for clout. That's what I'd call it. It's where they're not taking it seriously. The good bad girl, which is rebellious type, the character that shows up in the story, and you're like, oh, so they're good, but they're rebellious. They've got chains on their clothes. They smoke, or whatever they do. You run into the danger of making them too cliche because it's been repeated before. But you're like, oh, this is common. This has been done before. Everyone knows this. Then you've got the anti-hero, my personal favorite, the anti-hero, because you've got someone who's utterly selfish, but is like, fine, I'll save them, but how much are you going to pay me? Or fine, I'll save them, but I'll do it for this reason. And so you've got the anti-hero, someone who has a bit more grayness to them, someone who's, a bit more like us, a bit more like, someone who, in the middle of your day-to-day of whether you're doing your job or whether you're doing other stuff, your friend calls you or someone calls you, and suddenly you've got to balance whether you've got to choose your children or helping your friend out. And me, I'm stupid. I go help the friend. And I go, hey, kids, I'll see you in like an hour. Suddenly 6 hours pass. But you're helping somebody out. Then you got breaking the fourth wall. Family Guy has spent ages doing this. Where they even, I was watching a cartoon episode recently where there was a episode where they literally revisited the first episode because Stewie and Brian, the dog, baby, and it's funny that the beauty of having a talking baby and a talking dog, and yet they gotten away with it for decades. But they break the fourth wall, and Stewie is sitting there talking to the camera and being like, are they okay? Like, they're just not talking. And it's really that he's making fun of the fact that they would do an ad break or they do a flashback. And so they're all just standing around the table awkwardly, just standing there. And it's like static silence. And it's because they're having a flashback. And that was in the pilot episode. They were like, well, remember that time when we went to the grocery store and we did this? Something you'd have a flashback scene. But with them revisiting the past, they're not in that moment. So therefore, they're not seeing the flashback. So all you're seeing is static. So that's another trope. The charming villain, which is something that I saw with your story, actually, a little bit, with the fact that you have a villain who's like charming, who's charismatic, funny. Freddy Krueger, he was a common charming villain. He would say something really funny. You knew he was creepy, but yet here you are going, because he's like, I'm your girlfriend now, Nancy, or your boyfriend now, Nancy, and he'd like lick the phone or whatever. And you're just like going, in any other like realm of reality, I would be creeped out. But right now, because I'm super invested in the story right now, that was funny as fuck.
Right.
And then you've got the enemies to lovers. So I'm running down the list of stuff, but like basically, tropes or cliches are extremely useful tools if they're executed right, which means that you have taken the character or characters that you're playing with, the cast, and you are putting them in situations where it feels a bit been there, done that, but with the way you're doing it, you're like, holy shit, I recognize this, but this is entertaining and riveting. Like, because you've been there, it's familiar, but it really helps you tell the story. And I noticed you do that too with yourself, like with your stories.
Well, yes. Well, I involve a lot of things because I had found at one time this chart, and I utilize it for my villains, period. There are certain things that you got to remember when you're creating a villain. And remember, when you have a tale, whether it's the hero's tale, the heroine's tale, or it's the villain's tale, you always have to have a villain. There's always got to be a villain of some sort, because your hero and heroine can't be the hero and heroine without a villain.
Riveting villain, yes.
So you have to create a villain that's going to make your story believable. One of the biggest aspects, one of the first things that you have to do when you create a villain, now remember, any motivation can be a villainous one. Now, you have to make sure that your villain is willing to unjustly or excessively hurt someone to see their plan through. Okay, that's what makes the villain the villain. They have to be willing to hurt somebody. That's
exactly.
Okay. Now, anybody from all walks of life can be a villain. All right. Think about the people that you've met or you've known, and basically ask yourself, what might someone living their lives be doing to hurt someone? That can give you a potential villain right there. Now,
yep.
What you're talking about in relation to like TJ in the story that I'm writing, religion, okay, is what drove TJ's father to do harm. Then TJ now does harm, but now it's TJ the villain, okay? And your villain doesn't always have to be an individual. It can be something else, like religion can be your villain.
See, I don't see TJ as an antagonist. I see him as a protagonist who is being challenged and is being asked to do great but terrible things.
TJ, on his own free will, decides to do horrible things, but he's doing horrible things to horrible people, kind of like the whole Dexter ideology.
Yes.
Okay. Dexter, a serial killer, only kills bad people. There has to be criteria for him to, in his mind, justly kill them. Okay. So this is kind of the TJ has a Dexter mentality trope to it. If you can call the Dexter series now a trope, because it's a unique way of doing things that now is being utilized, like in my story, So there's a trope that you can work with that, isn't an everyday thing. So it makes you wonder throughout the whole story, is TJ the hero or the villain? And then, of course, the secondary story that I have going along with it, is the hero truly the hero or the villain? So it kind of keeps you going to where you don't really know who the hero and who the villain is until, your own personal belief system is going to influence who you believe to be the hero and villains in this story. So if you're someone that is like, yes, TJ, go, TJ's your hero. And it's just like, oh my God, he's killing all these people. He's so evil. He's the villain. Which is he?
Yeah, see, and I love that about fiction, is that you could take any story that exists already that you were inspired by in the first place, and then you could spin it and like twist it and be like, I wonder what would happen if in this scene, instead of doing it this way, like instead of doing whatever that character did in that scene, you flipped it, but then you took that scene or that aspect of that scene, ripped it out of there, and then recreated the situation, threw in some other spices in there. It's kind of like cooking a meal. Like you're taking a recipe that you already know, and then you're just tweaking it a little bit, adding in some stuff, and then being like, let's try this. Let's experiment. That's kind of what writing is. One thing I wanted to touch on is the fact that through all the steps, actions to be made by any hero or villain or whatever your character is, even if it's like a mental crisis, there has to be like a sense of action there. So that's what helps make the trope work. Is that, and this is something there was a chapter I was struggling with all of like the last few weeks, and it's because character's getting a sword, right? and it's supposed to be some sort of inheritance. But the problem is that he started to slip more into a passive mentality, and that was partly my fault. But it's because of the fact that as I'm writing it, even if there's like mental stuff going on or there's actual like physical material things going on, action has to be happening, and that's something that has to be make the trope work in fiction. Because if you're using the anti-hero, or you're using rebellious teenager, or you're using charismatic villain, there has to be an action being made, like whether that's them picking up a cup, or whether that's something more nuanced or subtle, that sort of thing. There has to be an action, otherwise your reader will be reading it and be like, you're just telling me what's going on. But really, that you're not telling anybody what's going on. You're trying to be illustrative. You're trying to, be showy, but with the way you executed it came off as telling.
Absolutely.
Hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. And not only that, if you're going to have a villain, okay, villains who are all talk and no action, they're not scary. You have to have villains that do bad things. Otherwise,
Yep.
they're not a villain, okay? And the bad things they do, they have to be to the people that you like in the story, So you have to make sure that the villain's actually doing bad things, because if the villain's only a villain in name, then there's no justification to the villain. You have to have actions, kind of like what I'm doing in Rainbow Prophecy and all that. There is a lot of villainous action right off at the beginning. There's an assault, there's a rape scene, there's a battle, there's violence, there's controversy. Every chapter so far, there is action going on that makes you hate the villains even more, that make you love the hero even more, and wish that the hero would do more, because you're getting frustrated, because it's like she just needs to do more when she can't do more yet, because she doesn't have the knowledge to do more. So now you're wanting people to give her that knowledge. So it's as the story goes on, the villainous aspects of it become even more villainous,
Which is part of why the mentor is important too in that tale, because she has to learn it some way, whether it's direct from an actual character or whether it's indirect, which is what they try to do with the Star Wars trilogy, the new one with Rey and Kylo Ren and those guys. They try to give her a little book that was archaic and be like, okay, go learn it now. Here's your manual. Even though like Anakin and every other Jedi ever actually got taught it, by an actual mentor. And Luke was like, I'm going to just teach you 3 lessons. And that's it. And so all she had really was a book to teach her things. And so you had your indirect mentor more than your direct mentor. And so that's why mentors in fiction, like with the hero's tale, even with the villain's tale, actually it's actually more dynamic if the villain has a mentor, because then you have somebody teaching them how to do these terrible things, but then they have to they're learning it, and because if you have somebody that already knows it and is like, oh, ha, 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 I already know how to do all these things, it's somehow less powerful than if they're learning it as they're going, and they're like, oh my god, I just did that, I just killed that person, or oh, I did this, and you're seeing their reaction. You're able to learn what the villain is capable of doing, what they're willing to do versus not willing to do, and then you start learning their limitations, and then you're starting to learn the facets, what their the dynamics are. And that's something I think that would help you as well with your characters, because it feels like you're treading on the fence of good and evil, and so you're kind of like in the trenches of that, and you're making them more and more gray, and so they're doing terrible things, but the question mark is are they doing it because they want to do it or because they have to for survival, or whether anything like that. Like there's some, that the motivations of the character and the intentions are extremely important to that dynamic.
Right. Well, and here's the thing, where people will be cheering on TJ. He's taking on the characteristics of his belief system from the evil that claims to be good. Okay. So it's like when you have an avenue of religious belief that is supposed to be good, and people do bad things under the name of that, and they cause harm. And now you're trying to take those things and put it into that character that is doing things that are taught by this belief system that's supposed to be good, and he's utilizing it to its fullest extent and pointing out the evils of it along the way. You start to question, what is good and evil? And it gets to a point where it's no longer about what's good and evil, it's about what's right and wrong, and there's a difference there. What do we look at as some things that are evil, and what are some things that we look at that are wrong? There might be a difference in that. So when you start nitpicking all these different little things, it makes the character more interesting, because now you just don't know. Instead of him following a guideline of what he's supposed to do according to the trope of the villain or the trope of the hero, either or, there's this mix going back and forth where he questions even himself as to what he's doing.
Yeah.
What is right and what is wrong. So what is good, what is bad, what is righteous, what is evil. And when you start really breaking it down, it's just like, we create a lot of these things in everyday life, that when we do harm on others, we think we're not. I mean, just like take pro-choice, pro-life. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You have one side that says you're killing an unborn child. You have the other side saying it's not a child and it's the woman's right to autonomy. Okay. Bodily autonomy. Both are claiming the other side is evil.
Yeah.
Who's right and who's wrong? What is evil? What is not? And I'm not going to get into the whole pro-choice, pro-life argument. It's just that if you look at it from both sides, you can see where oh my God, what do we do here? How do we reach a line of it's not evil on either side, or it's not bad on either side, or both sides have some good points? How do we justify them? This whole questioning of what's right and what's wrong,
Yeah.
and usually people pick a side instead of looking at, here's the information that we truly need to look at. So this is what TJ's journey is looking at the information that he needs to look at and figuring out what he should be looking at and what he shouldn't be.
Yeah. That's a fair point too, especially when the way we're talking about it sounds like we're doing it pretty cut and dry, despite the fact we're talking about like multiple facets, compass being blurred or not blurred. But when you're bringing up I know that you were getting cautious talking about that political topic that's in our media a lot. But really, that's actually a perfect example, because that's the question of life and death. It's a question of is this being, or product of creation that's growing inside a woman. It's the question of importance. It's the question of what is more important, the creation inside the woman or the creation of the woman, like herself. Or she helped create the child, like her body naturally through science created a child. And so the question is, whether or not you sacrifice the child for the woman's needs, desires, what her intentions are, or whether or not you don't allow her to do that and you revoke her right to choose, her will to choose. And so that's the danger there in the waters, is the fact that either gender or either side is arguing about those ideological questions. And so when it comes to a villain, depending on your villain, they may just be like, I don't care either way. Or they may say, screw you, I'm going to make the choice for you because I'm a villain. It depends on your villain as to what direction they would even swing. People love to romanticize the fact that villain would give the woman the right to choose, because they think that that's quote unquote, what villain would do. But really, it depends on what villain you're talking about and what even makes them a villain in the first place. Because if they're an antagonist, all that means is that they're opposing the protagonist. And depending on who your protagonist, It's the who your antagonist is. Because if they're truly a mirrored image, or if they're truly, you know, a mirror, something that's supposed to be inverted image of what the protagonist is, as to have what argument or what side they would choose. So I think that people are romanticizing the idea of evil a little much, and so I don't know. I don't. When I told my wife, like when she was talking about whether or not she would have the newest child or not, for years I was under the idea that the father should be able to have a say in it, and I still have that notion. Like I still have that idea that the father should have some sort of say in it. But at the same time, it is her body, and so it's funny because we live in such a gray world, and yet depending on your ideological notions as to whether or not you take a black and white approach or not, because you got pro-choice or pro-life, not are we in the middle or are we gonna it's very black and white in that notion, and so that's the humor and irony of our society right now, is depending on what political topic you're talking about, and depending on what multifaceted nature of the subject is, as to whether people go they're traveling grayness, and then suddenly they're like, oh, over here, or oh, over here, and sometimes they'll white knight it, and they'll be like, I am so good because I am defending your choice to have a choice, or they'll say, oh, I'm gonna romanticize this because it makes me look so good and everything. Me, I'm just like, it's technically it is her body. As long as she knows what she's doing, and as long as she knows, where she's going with it. Hopefully, she's been educated. Though I years ago, when I was in my early 20s, I wanted, the person who was having to make that choice to know what they were doing, and I got called evil for that. I got demonized for that, and so I was like, wait a minute. So now education is evil. Wait a minute. So now training is bad. Like, so it's that's the dangers of the waters of that topic. But it's part of the trope, right? Because it's the will they won't they.
Yes.
It's the will they won't they. It's the anti-hero.
Yes. And again, depending upon where your own personal belief system falls, is going to determine how you are going to look at who's the antagonist, who's the protagonist. Even though the writer might be writing this one character as the pro and the other as the anti, the reader might take it the other way around because of a belief system. And that's what makes a lot. I intentionally write so that the person's going to question which side they're on. And no matter which side you are on, I'm bringing up things that make you look at it from another side. So you can't help but think, have I been wrong all of these years? Because that's what I do with my writing. I want people to think about things. So this is where I deviate from the standard cliche tropes. Mm-hmm. I throw in a little mix of things and make it a little bit different. I don't want you to be reading and be expecting something to happen and it happens. I want you to be reading and expecting something to happen and it doesn't happen the way you think it's going to happen. And now you're going to be like, whoa, wait, what? They did what? She did what? Did what? Well, that doesn't make sense. Why? Why did that happen that way? And then you start to see why. And it's just like, oh, I never looked at it that way. Now you're, again, a new way of thinking, something new, something different. And I like it.
See, I love how you used your phrasing that was in your story. Like that one time when you read it out and stuff. Yeah. I think it was either after a podcast or it was during a podcast. You read some of that out. And I recognize that phrasing instantly.
I will bring up a part where I use that, and I'll read part of it in the show here, maybe towards the end.
I mean, you could do it now if you wanted.
I don't know where to go. Hold on a second. Give me a second. I'll read part of it. Let's see. All right. All right. He stared at the white two-story house. He noticed the sky to the left was starting to lighten. He knew the sun was coming. His thoughts wandered, wondering if he imagined his conversation with Sergeant Davies. Then he noticed a billowing of smoke rising from the house, coming somewhere from the back. Maybe his mother started breakfast, frying eggs, bacon, and potatoes for his father. No, he would smell the bacon grease. Then TJ saw more smoke. He could hear the crackling of fire. Suddenly, he heard glass explode. The flames appeared. The fire grew rapidly. He heard his mother scream. TJ smiled. The house was ablaze, black smoke rising into the air, forming dancing clouds above the house. The first rays of the sun started to hit the smoke. Then TJ heard the most guttural scream, something new, a sound he had never heard before. TJ smiled. He liked this new sound. He somehow knew this sound was the voice of death. He welcomed this sound, a pleasurable, placating overture. The front door. He could hear a rattle. It vibrated as if someone was trying to open it. TJ moved towards the house, closer to the door. He remembered locking it. We never lock it. It opened. The flaming creature ran out. It headed straight for TJ. It was his father. Tom collapsed a few feet from TJ, his clothes and flesh becoming one. The smell of cotton and skin filled TJ's nostrils. It was something he never smelled before, something new. He liked it. TJ moved closer. Tom's face was blistering, his hair gone, his teeth showing as his lips were starting to peel and crack, with wisps of smoke exiting his mouth. TJ could see the fear in his father's eyes, something he had never seen before, something new. He liked it. He smiled.
I also love how like the way you're describing this character. And by the way, I think I've said it before, and I'll say it again. But you're nonfiction, like you wrote nonfiction and stuff, right? Like you've
Yeah.
written research, you've written stuff like that.
Yes.
That has helped you be extremely deliberate with your word choice, and it's
Yes.
helped you be extremely like just fine tuned. Like you're not like writing extra words or not slipping into passive tense or things like that. I think it's really helped you. But I really liked how this character. It's like every time they experience something, it's something new. It's something different. And
Well,
it's like they're like a 2-year-old child exploring the world.
you got to remember, though, this is from the first chapter where he kills his parents, and it's people are going to be like, but why did he kill his mother? She didn't do anything. And you find out later it's because she stood by and allowed it to happen. She was just as guilty,
Yep.
So when you're seeing the development of who TJ is and how he feels about people, the bad that he sees in people, the things that there's certain bad things that he can excuse because they were taught incorrectly. But there's other things when pointed out, and it's like, if you still can't see it, why are you even here in my existence? I mean, it's the psychology and the philosophy that you're going to recognize with TJ. Bryce will love TJ because TJ is a stoic. All right. He's so full of all of these emotions and he just doesn't show them.
Yeah. No, I really liked the fact that there was a bit of Dexter in there, like a bit of Dexter
Yes.
in how he operates. And Bryce says, "Isn't it better to write politically neutral to appeal to the broadest audience and to focus on the story characters, unless of course it's a book meant to push a specific political narrative?"
My book is meant to push humanitarian values. And I use a lot of, I don't talk about parties. I don't mention my belief system or the belief system of the parties. I just point out good and bad things. It's up to the people to decide if it's a narrative that's attractive to one side or the other. They can look at it in any way they want. I don't have to mention which side is which. People will figure that out. The bottom line is that it is neutral to an extent, where the bad guys harm people. The good guys don't like to harm people. My good guys only harm bad people.
Which brings me to my next point. Villain's Tale, which is something I like to play with, by the way. The Villain's Tale can use hero-like traits as a red herring. So you can make the hero or make the reader or audience believe that the villain is actually a good character by using hero-like traits, and
Yes.
then and use that as a red herring to redirect the narrative and make you think that something's going to go a certain direction, and then it feels like a right turn or left turn when they decide to do something else instead. And it's because you were ahead of the story, and the reader was properly behind the story, and they were following the character, and then you're like, plot twist, by the way, this is going to happen now. And suddenly they're like, what the fuck just happened? And they believe that, the character was a hero all along, but really they were a budding villain.
Well, it's just like you got the little girl that she's just cute and proper and uses proper English and talks so magnificently and is just listening to her parents, eats her dinner so perfect, does exactly what she's told. And then later on, she's outside and she's petting this cat, and then she just breaks its neck. And you're like, what the just what? No.
Right?
Yeah. Sometimes people present in one way, but do things another way when people aren't looking. I use a lot of that in my writing.
Yep, like as audience me is very different from writer me. Writer me would haunt the shit out of audience me because like audience me would be like, no, don't kill him. But then writer me is going, you're gonna die now. And
Yes.
like, just funny things like that. Another thing I wanted to talk about, because remember we're talking about the differences between them. Heroine's Tale is an interesting one because you could use both feminine and masculine for the heroine's tale. Like you can make it more emotional, but you can also make the character gutsy, more physically demanding. Cara Dune on Mandalorian was an example of this. While Mandalorian's story is going on and you're following him from town to town and he's walking everywhere, he's carrying the foundling, as he calls Baby Yoda or Grogu. Cara Dune is his sidekick, but when it's more focused on her, I don't know if audience notices this. I did. But they're taking a feminine character who's a female and they're giving her masculine traits and balancing them so she can definitely take care of herself. She's obviously female or obviously feminine, but at the same time, she's obviously a soldier, someone who's masculine. They mixed it. They mixed it a little bit. And then you've got Bo-Katan and some other female characters who have it mixed where they're, obviously feminine or feminine leading, but they also have their masculine mix up. And so that's part of the heroine's tale. The heroine's tale tends to be a bit more emotionally driven. It tends to be a bit more psychological driven because instead of you doing a special effects CGI fight, as I call it, even though like it's a book and stuff and you're going to be reading it, I call it a special effects CGI fight because if you were to animate it or if you were to turn it into like a movie, then there would be CGI involved or some sort of orchestration of fighting, of fighty. So if you want to take that one.
Do you have trouble enjoying books that push a background worldview or politics that you don't agree with, or can you enjoy the story characters in a vacuum? Okay. The world politics and the worldview have nothing to do with whether I'm going to enjoy it or not. It has to do with the writing and how well it's done. I don't care what the view is. If the story makes sense and it's well written and it throws loops in there and stuff, let me give you an example. The Walking Dead is probably one of the most well-written shows I've ever seen. And you have this transition when Negan comes into play. Okay. Negan is the bad guy. He is the villain that you love to hate. Okay. And he kills main characters. Glenn. He killed Glenn. No.
In front of everybody, too.
Huh?
In front of everybody. Like, there was everybody around him, and he just, just to signify his strength.
Yes. And what that does is it brings in just how evil and how bad this guy is and how much you want to hate him. I mean, that was so well written. And I know there was a lot of people pissed when Glenn died. Well, Glenn was supposed to die even sooner, but hey, they stretched it out. Anyways, bottom line is that is some fabulous writing. And now you're looking at Negan, and I'm not going to spoil it for people, but now you see a different side of Negan. You see what made Negan Negan. And now you have sympathy for the devil. Okay? This is just well written. Doesn't matter if you like politically or the worldview of Negan. The character itself is just well written. I love the character Negan. I hope he becomes a good guy eventually. I hope he becomes a hero eventually. But whether he does or not, that's again for the writer to decide. I love how it's portrayed, and that's going to keep me in. So
I'm always gonna see the actor as John Winchester though from Supernatural. Because he plays because what's funny is when they were filming, I don't remember what season it was for Walking Dead, but when Supernatural was in its 13th season, I think it was episode 300. The way he was costumed on Supernatural was similar to Walking Dead because their sets were like right next to each other. So he literally walked across the hallway, got his hair changed up a little bit, got his uniform, his costume changed a little bit, and suddenly he was John Winchester again from Supernatural.
all right, Bryce. Paul, you could even enjoy a book that had a backdrop of MAGA rally or pro-Trump characters who played the hero role. Yes, if it was written well. Yeah, if it was
because
politics of MAGA and pro-Trump people, but if the book was written well, yeah, I could, and even if they're played as the hero role, trust me, I could read a book. I'm going to say it. I could read a book where Hitler, Mussolini, any of the bad guys out there, Vladimir Putin, where they are literally considered the hero. I could read that and enjoy the book, depending upon how it's written. I may not like what's being portrayed. I may not agree with what's being portrayed. But if the writing's good, I would enjoy the book, though I may not like the outcome of it.
Which also plays into sorry to cut you off, Paul. Didn't mean that. But there's a note in here that I wrote here that says execution often depends on whether reader, and to an extension, the storyteller connects with the overall characters. So if you're connecting with MAGA, it's so interesting how when you're a 15-year-old kid like me in 10th grade, years and years ago, and you're reading about World War II and reading about how Hitler rose to power, and history's trying to define good and evil, and history's trying to define people in history with good or evil backdrops, and yet here we are today with people calling him MAGA or maggot or whatever, and you could take a character who believes in the nobility, believes in the good things about their idealist system from that nature, make them compelling, make them empathetic, make them care about their families, make them care about their friends. The thing that drove them to believe in that idealist system in the first place, because they believe that the other side is trying to destroy foundation of family. They believe the system's trying to destroy their ability to protect their own. The very foundation of their ideal system is about protecting the people around them and protecting themselves. It's about the love versus hate, which is part of the hero's tale. It's the duty versus love, responsibility for your surroundings and your people versus sacrifice and things like that. And that plays into that. So if you wrote a book that was in the point of view of someone who supported MAGA, or supported that ideal system, but you wrote them as an empathetic, caring individual, and not the cartoon caricature that people like to portray them as, then you would have a complex narrative to follow because you could empathize and connect with them on a dynamic human level.
Yes. I have read tons of books. I've seen and read dozens of documentaries, autobiographies, stuff like that, with people that I may not agree with their worldview or their political view or their point of view or their ideological views. And depending upon how it's written, I might find some of the information very compelling. I might find some of the information like, wow, that's why they see the world in this way. Oh, okay. I can comprehend this now. Now I see why they have this ideology. I don't agree with it, but now I kind of understand why. And for me, it's more of a information aspect. I'm gaining knowledge and information. So whether it's fiction or nonfiction, I see how people think and how their mind works, and that's what brings in the intrigue. So as long as they're meeting the criteria of something that is interesting to me, for whatever the reason, I'm going to jump into it. I think most people are naturally turned off by stories that undermine their own beliefs, worldviews. It takes a mature reader to digest that. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I guarantee you, and I'm just going to put it out there for what's going on in today's world. If you have a book that says Trump on the front and you have a book that says Biden on the front, okay, the people that love Biden are going to pick up that Biden book and read it. And the people that love Trump are going to pick up that Trump book and read it. Okay. The people that truly want to educate themselves and learn more are going to pick up the other side's book also.
Yep.
And if they can get through the first few pages based upon how the person writes, they might entertain that writing so that they can get a comprehension of where that person's mind is. I have a lot of books up here that I have read that, like I said, I may not agree with the nature of it. I may not. Let's take the Communist Manifesto, okay, Marx and Engels, all right? I don't agree with a lot of the stuff that Marx and Engels talks about, but when you really listen to what they're trying to illustrate, I agree with their presentation and their viewpoints on why things might go a certain way and why things that may happen. I may not agree with how things should be in their eyes, but I can agree with some of the things that they're talking about because they're right on. They're absolutely nailing it. So you need to read things that can bring you a perspective of thought. And the more that you read fiction and nonfiction, the more you educate yourself in a multitude of ways. Because even if it's fiction, there's still always going to be some undertone of truth in that, because every writer puts a little bit of themselves in that book. They put a little bit of their belief system in that book. So you're going to find a little bit of how that writer views things and thinks about things. So that's, again, something that if you pick up on it, you can get a lot more out of a book and a writer and what their intent is than what you would if you just so
Can I add something to that?
yeah.
One of my favorite people to listen to, politically speaking, they're not even political pundits. They're just average guys like you and me. One just happens to be super rich off this podcast, and the other guy happened to be an actor, and now he's a podcaster as well. And he was a comedian. Russell Brand and Joe Rogan. The reason why is because Joe Rogan is, by all intents and purposes, from what people see him as, they see him as a political pundit, conservative, or they see him as a conservative podcaster. But really, he's just in between. He's just kind of in the middle. And then you got Russell Brand, who tends to be more left. But when you put them together, together. There was a video that Russell Brand made where he actually titled it very funnily, because again, he's a comedian. He said, "Me and Joe Rogan arguing respectfully," and like, and it was in caps, and it was basically him and Joe Rogan going back and forth about their viewpoints and how society is, and how they were going in holistically, wide landscape wise, and then going on a more micro level on the individual. And I would much rather have a balance. This is what I was getting towards. I'd much rather have a balance of uh, an echo chamber versus a disagree chamber, in which you've got two people who are respectfully disagreeing, but you're able to see either's point of views in a balanced way. Because if you just have an echo chamber of, oh yeah, these people are evil, oh yeah, all this stuff, and you have everyone doing like, yeah, 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 you're not getting any information. You're just getting the same thing regurgitated a million times. Whereas if you have two people who have very different viewpoints, but they're able to converse, relate, and they're able to give information from either side, respectfully speaking, and not get so emotionally invested that they think they're being personally attacked, and they're able to disconnect enough, engage enough to where they're understanding, but then disengage enough to where they're not taking it as an insult. I find that to be one of the most useful parts of learning.
Yeah.
Bryce said something else. So good exercise for your listeners is to read a few books or listen to a few podcasts that contrast your belief system. It's good for personal growth. That's Russell Brand. That's Russell Brand and Joe Rogan. It's amazing.
Absolutely. If you truly want to learn and understand why people think in different ways than what you think, you need to read their stuff, listen to their stuff, have an understanding of where they're coming from. Because for all you know, you may have it wrong. You may have it wrong. And if you listen to other people, I may have it wrong. My belief system may be wrong. I don't believe it is. Okay. But I might have it wrong. And I know that when I wrote this, I had a belief system on a lot of things that I wrote about that I changed my point of view on because I found flaws in my belief system. So, again, very good point, Bryce. Very good point. I'm going to put that right back up there. Good exercise for your listeners is to read a few books or listen to a few podcasts that contrast your belief system. It's good for personal growth. Absolutely. What's the worst thing you're going to do? Spend 10 hours of your time reading a book that you found to be complete garbage? Okay, was it truly a waste? Was it? Possibly. Or then again, you might find something in there that goes, wow, I never looked at it that way. Let me think about this.
Yeah, I'd much rather have myself think considerably about where I'm standing on something, and not be like to the point where like you're dealing with an identity crisis. We don't want that. But something that's like, it causes you to learn something, causes you to relearn, learn to unlearn and learn to relearn. Basically, disconnect yourself from your own personal bias enough to where you can take in new information and then be able to learn something new that hopefully helps you grow as a person, both in your pathos and your ethos and your logos. Be able to spin it enough in your brain to where hopefully you're able to get to that next step in your life that you were probably lacking this entire time. Like, there are parts of my life that have been bettered by listening to you, for instance. And when I first met you and stuff, I was like, I don't know, like Paul's a little hardcore on some things and a little heavy, but like but once you get used to it, once you you connect and you are able to mesh a bit more, then it clicks and you're able to learn something. And I've learned quite a bit from you. I hope you've learned some stuff from me. And that's what happens when you get two people who are actually able to willing to learn from each other and experience things together.
Absolutely. I'm going to give you another example because I'm going to bring this right back to the hero, the villain, and the heroine. Okay.
Yes.
You learn how to play chess. All right. You learn how to play the game of chess. And you get to where you can beat the person that you're playing. All right. And now, when you're looking for other people to play, you only find the people that you know you can beat. Are you learning anything new? No. You've just limited your level of play. You can't play any higher up because you're unwilling to lose. Okay? If you're unwilling to lose, you're unwilling to learn.
Mm-hmm.
The only way you're going to learn is you have to lose when you play the game. Same thing with writing. Okay? When we bring you these different aspects of writing, none of us writers are experts on anything because we're all still learning. We are improving upon ourselves by listening to others and learning from them. Because T-Paw has a better understanding of some things than I do. I have a better understanding of some things than T-Paw does. As we communicate, we share those things. And it's like, wow, I didn't know that. Wow, I didn't know that. When I do Tuesday Takes with Luke, same thing. We're learning from each other. Are we experts? No. Are we published? Yeah, we're published, but that doesn't make us an expert, no more than it makes Stephen King an expert. Is Stephen King knowledgeable? Oh, you betcha. Can you learn a lot from Stephen King? Oh, you betcha. But he doesn't know everything. Okay.
Right.
Nobody that's written a book knows everything about writing a book. You have some knowledge, you've written a book, it's sold. Hey, boom, you got it out there. Because there's a lot of people that write books that don't get it out there. And it's not because they're not good writers, but maybe they just haven't learned how to get it out there. Maybe they need to talk to somebody to learn how to do that. So when we talk about the hero's tale, the villain's tale, and the heroine's tale, these are aspects of writing. Not every story has to have a hero and a villain. Okay? Not every story has to have these things that we talk about. But if you're writing a story that has a hero, a villain, a heroine, maybe some of the things that we talk about might help you improve upon what you're doing. Okay. And if you're willing to read things that you may not like, and always remember this, if you're reading a book and it's just not clicking with you, and you decide to read that book all the way through, figure out why that book isn't clicking with you. Figure out what it is about that book that doesn't resonate with you. Why doesn't it resonate? Because if you do that, you can make sure that when you write your book, you don't make the same things, do the same things that didn't resonate with you that this person did. All right. So there's a lot of different things that you can pick up from other people's literature. It may not even be the content of the story. It may be how they wrote the story. So there's a lot of things that you can learn from reading. It's just like a bad horror movie. I will sit there and watch a bad horror movie. All right. I will watch it all the way through because I am picking it apart. Oh my God, this was just a great plot. The setting sucks. The writing sucks. The idea of it is awesome. If they would have done this, and this, they could have had they could have had the next great movie. Oh my God. And then I watch great movies and it's like, well, what made The Lord of the Rings so great? What made the Game of Thrones so great? What made True Blood so great? What made The Sopranos so great? What made them become what they were? Okay. T-Paul, you're kind of frozen there. So all I can suggest is that you go on and you read things that you may or may not like. Get that taste out there for other things and try to learn from it, And granted, like the first book I got published, is it a difficult read? Yeah, because I could have done much better on a lot of things. It's my first book. But guess what? I have a first book now. Now I'm going to have a second book and a third and a fourth and so on because I love writing. I am now in a world that is me and I love this. So I'm spending the rest of my life writing and fighting for human rights. And we have lost TPA. So we'll see if he comes back in, and we'll try to get a last word with him. If not, we're probably going to close this out. Bryce, did you have any more questions? I really appreciate you coming in and asking some of this stuff. It's good education for a lot of our viewers to pick up on, because, here he is. All right, welcome back.
Hello, internet decided to go.
I was just thanking Bryce for coming in. He asked a lot of good questions that can help our viewers. Did you have anything else to add to this? If Bryce doesn't have another question?
Yeah, all I really have to say that to really close with is that at the end of the day, bottom line, whether you're telling a hero's tale, yeah, I've been reading off some of the stuff off this, whether you're telling a hero's tale, villain's tale, or heroine, whatever character you're telling, you have to tell the story that you yourself are interested in, because tropes are only tropes if treated as such. You must use them as tools in respect of all the characters. Every time I ever write anything, whether I'm writing a trope or whether I'm, writing anything, I always go, well, would this honor the character? Would this honor the story I'm telling? Because at the end of the day, whether or not 1,000 copies are sold, whether or not 1,000,000 copies are sold, because I asked myself that once. I was like, well, if there's 10 million copies sold, does that make me a genius now? No, that just means 10 million people bought a copy. So really, it comes down to honoring the story you're telling, honoring yourself, but honoring the fictional make-believe characters that you are telling. And so tropes and cliches are only tropes and cliches will be treated that way. That's why I like when I talk about inverting the narrative, or when I talk about taking left or right turns. It's me taking and going, oh, I'm going this way. Well, generally speaking, this is the way that I know that they typically go. How about if we do this? And we go, veer left or veer right. And so a lot of times I like to invert it. And so bottom line is, tell the stories you're interested in telling, because if you get halfway through and you're like trying to follow a trend, or you're like, oh, well, this was used in a popular movie, so I must use it this way. Well, if that's not interesting to you, you're going to get bored anyway. And if you're bored, then the reader is going to be like, well, why the fuck did I show up? Because I paid for it. Like, I paid for a ticket and I'm bored now. And so be invested, be emotionally invested, connect the shit out of the character, because if you're going to use a trope or you're going to use a cliche, use it effectively as a tool, because then you can honor the people that are in your head.
Exactly. And I want you to also think about this. All right. You have writers that write because they want to make money, and you have writers that write because they have a message to put out. First thing you got to ask yourself, do I want to make money, or do I want to relay a message? Mm-hmm. From there, that's going to dictate how you write your story, because there's guidelines that you got to follow if you're in it for the money. If you're in it because you got a story to tell and you want it out there, it doesn't matter how many people buy your book. What matters is the fact that you wrote a story and you got it out there. Whether it's self-published, traditionally published, doesn't matter. You wrote a book.
Yep, you wrote a story, you told a story, and hopefully you had fun doing it, because it's not a sprint, it's a freaking marathon. And so can you go to sleep that night knowing that you're not going to be haunted by any missteps or any things you took? Like me, I will be. Like, I'll be sitting there laying in bed and being like, wait, I should have done that with this character, or I should have done that with this character, or in that scene, that thing could have played out this way. Oh shit, now I got to do that, because it's haunting me. And when you're a writer, you're a storyteller, that happens. Like, it's kind of like being a mechanic or being a plumber or something, and being like, or being an electrician and being like, oh shit, well, I did it this way when I really should have done that way. And then, you'll tell yourself, oh, I'll do it better next time, but it won't stop haunting you. And so if you don't stay to the integrity of yourself and your characters, it's going to cause issues. So just stay true to it. Stay true to it, and hopefully you'll find an ounce of truth in yourself, or an ounce of truth in, because, we talk about, speaking our truth. Well, that's kind of what it is.
It's exactly what writing a book is. It's speaking your truth. Make sure that you get your truth out there. Whether people like it or not, it doesn't matter. All that matters is that you get your truth out there. With that said, remember, be kind, be happy, and may good things come your way. Thank you.
Meow.